Pet toys. Now that's something I never even thought about, but it seems like Americans and just people around the world are really into their pet toys. Mark Hirshberg realized that early on in the game and built an incredible company that does $100 million a year of sales just on pet toys. Mark is a fascinating guy, but how he got into the pet space is even more fascinating. Hear his story this week on Jewish Grit. Welcome to Jewish Grit. This week we have an amazing guest. It's a pleasure to welcome Mark Hirshberg to the podcast. Mark is one of the, if not the largest, one of the largest importers of, interestingly enough, pet toys, and has built a global business doing that. And we're super excited to talk to him and to welcome him into our studio today. Tell us a little bit about who Mark Hirshberg is. Talk to us a little bit about your personal journey, where you grew up, your professional journey, so that we know when we hear the wisdom from you, who is purveying that wisdom.
It all goes back to my grandparents who came from Germany in the 1930s. They ended up living in the basement of somebody's home that they knew, because obviously they came here penniless. And the gentleman whose home they were in, he was in the belt business, and he had a die cut machine in his basement, and he die cut leather belts. My grandfather took the scraps of the belts in the basement that were on the floor and turned them into dog toys, because in the 1930s, dogs only chewed on leather. In fact, rawhide is what dogs chew on now, became popular in the 1950s, almost 15 years later. And when rawhide was introduced to the market, it was called chewing gum for dogs, because it was an inexpensive version of the leather. So my grandfather got started in this industry by taking leather scraps off the floor and, instead of putting them in the trash, turning them into toys and eventually selling them to pet stores. So that is the introduction of my family into the pet industry.
That's incredible, because you take a really bad situation, you can't even get a regular apartment, and You're throwing scraps, and you turn that into opportunity.
Yeah, well, that was a lot of foresight for them, correct.
Okay, so then your father also?
So that was my mother's father.
Okay.
That was my grandfather, maternal. And then it's also interesting, and this conversation brings back these memories. When my parents got married, my mother was an only child, because when they left Germany, they could only have one child, and they were lucky to get here. And my grandfather begged my father to come into the business to help him. My father was a tool and die maker by trade, so my father worked for my grandfather like 9 to 5, then went and did tool and die making at nighttime, 5 days a week, and on the weekends. And my grandfather never knew he took the side job, because my grandfather couldn't pay him enough to sustain my dad.
That's remarkable. Okay, and then where do you fit into this whole narrative?
Okay, so that's a little bit of the history. So my dad then took over my grandfather's company, which was a family business. And
by the time he took it over, it was a successful business?
Yes, everything's relative to success in the 1950s and 60s, yes. In fact, that's the same time, in those days, a lot of the products were made in the United States. So really in the 50s and 60s is when they started to import from China. That's when the doors opened. And my father would always tell me he used to fly to China, and he'd have to make 3 stops on the way just to get there to refuel, where, we're a little spoiled. We go on and and 16 hours later, we're down. In those days, it was probably easily 24 hours, if not longer. So that was it. So I would say that they were pioneers of the industry. So my grandfather and my father had a company, and I did work there with my older brother for about 8 years, and then I decided in about the mid-1990s I wanted to do something on my own. So when I actually went off and I started Multipet, which is the current company.
So what was different about the company you started and the company you left?
Back in the day, and it still happens, if you go to China, you go into trading companies, and trading companies have 500 items on the walls, and you can pick the item that you want to buy. And you say, I'll take this one, I'll take that one. And a lot of their competitors in the day were doing the same thing. So when the products came to the States, it really became a price war, because 3 or 4 companies are importing the same duck for dogs, So then do we sell it for $1, $1.05, or, $1.02? And I identified that, and I decided that I wanted to bring elements of the toy industry into the pet industry, which I had not seen. Again, we're going back in the mid-1990s when I started the company. I also wanted to get unique designs that were not in the industry, and I wanted to work with designers, because I didn't want to get into a situation where competitors were selling the same items so we could name our price. Didn't mean that I was price gouging. I just didn't want someone to come to me and say, hey, I can get this product from Rabbi Landau for 5% less, so if you want the order, this is what you have to do. And that does happen all the time. It still happens today.
Now, did you was your new company a competition to the previous company, your family's company?
Indirectly, you would say we were in the same industry, but we weren't really competition because they were well established and they had a good reputation, and we were really starting from scratch. The only time I would say there was a conflict, and this is in my mind, maybe if you spoke to them you get a different answer, is back in the day if you went into a supermarket or a pharmacy, they'd only have a 4-foot pet section, so there's only so many toys they're going to put in. So I assume maybe if they took one of mine, and I don't think they would have eliminated one of theirs, but in that respect.
Potentially, it could be a company.
Potentially, but I would not say we were competitors.
Can we fast forward to today? Are both companies still standing?
No, unfortunately, that company closed they just shut their doors in 2016, so about 10 years ago, which I thought I would never see.
What happened?
This is my opinion. Again, if you spoke to them, you get a different answer. I don't think they changed enough with the times. I'm not sure we changed with the times too as well, but I think they did. So that could be the first lesson. You have to change with the times. I think they still ran that company, and they were very successful for a very long time. Yeah, they didn't adapt. I think they just kept things the way they were for the last, for the 30, 40 years they were in business.
So I want to drill down a little bit here.
Yeah.
The podcast is Jewish Grit. We hear the grit stories of different Jewish professionals. Can you share a moment in your personal or professional journey where maybe it didn't follow the script and the narrative, and you found yourself somewhere you didn't think you'd be, and you had to grit your way out? When
I left my family business in 1995, I always thought that would be my life. It was tough, and I did have 3 young kids. So I would say it was a big leap.
What gave you the strength to leave the comfort and stability and to venture on your own?
I knew what I had to do to survive, I guess, inner, and I didn't think I would thrive and survive in the environment I was in. I think I have spent a lot of my adult life trying to prove myself to myself, and probably to my father, I guess.
What did your wife think through this whole thing? Was she okay with you doing this?
Yeah, well, that's funny because one of the things is that I would talk about is you have to have the right support system, and my wife is very strong, and she did believe in me, and she was very supportive. She went back to work. She's a teacher, special ed teacher, and she worked till 2014. She pitched in, and she took the risk with me.
How many years are you guys married?
40 in 2 weeks.
What's the secret to a good marriage?
Laughter.
Oh, that's great.
What?
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I think the secret is good laughter. It's funny you say that because 3 minutes ago I was watching this quick clip, and it said, "Secret of good marriage is I do what I want and my spouse does what I want." But I don't think that's fair. I don't.
But humor and being able to enjoy happiness together is super important.
I know.
And how many children do you have?
I have 3.
You think you're a good dad?
Do I think I'm a good dad? Well, let's get to the point that all 3 of my children work in the company.
Oh, I did not know that.
So
That's fascinating.
I'm probably a better dad than a better boss.
Is that a conflict, having children? Because people say that it's not healthy for family members to work together.
Is it a conflict? Well, it's ironic because I came out of a family business, and
right,
I left it because of conflicts. And
then you just recreated it. Oh my gosh.
Exactly. I'm no better. I always say I'm turning into my dad. Which might be the worst thing, but my wife always does remind me, don't make the same mistakes your father did.
So how do you navigate that delicate balance?
Well, each one has a different responsibility. I have one son who's like an inventory wizard. We have a lot of inventory and does purchasing. My other son is really strong in marketing and social media, which again, adapting, changing.
100%.
He's the one who comes and says, we have to have an open workstation for everyone, things like that. little things like that. And I have a daughter who is really in sales. So I'm trying to keep everyone in there.
Did you groom them? This should be my sales, my marketer, and my inventory?
It's really interesting because my oldest son is actually an animator. He went to college, he majored in animation, and he's very creative and talented. And when he came to the company, I actually thought that's what he would do, design toys and marketing.
Right.
Because that is who he is, and that's his narrative. But instead, he's into numbers and inventory control, and it's not what I would have thought.
But is he happy there?
I hope he's happy. Yeah,
Okay, great.
He should be happy. He does a great job.
What makes you most proud to be a Jew?
I feel like I hit the jackpot. I do. I think being Jewish hit the jackpot. Every time I go into my synagogue, I learn something new from my clergy. I feel at home, and I think there's always more to learn. And I actually think I probably only know about 3% of what I need to know. There's just unbelievable amount of information and knowledge that you can get regarding our religion and our heritage. But I think that I always strive to grow and be better. And I think that's the Jewish mindset, and it's something that I carry with me every day.
What makes you happy?
I think being at peace with myself.
Okay.
It makes me happy. A lot of cliche answers you can say, of course, being with my family makes me happy. Being at work really makes me happy. It does. But I think you really have to like who you are and not be a follower.
What do you find is the biggest challenge professionally for you today?
Our business became a little unpredictable. Everything was going along. Again, I have this theory. You don't know how good you have it till you don't have it anymore.
Right.
So we went through COVID, which was the first thing, and then we were closed.
But did that help you in terms, because a lot of people, tried to take care of their pets or got pets, no?
Well, what happened, yes, but we didn't know that at the beginning. Fortunately, we were considered an essential company only because of the pet food industry.
Oh.
Because they categorized pet for people who made treats and food, and anything that was in pet went along with it. So,
but you don't make
no,
treats
we
and
don't.
food.
But the industry
Fascinating.
became essential. What we did is we worked 4 days a week. 4 days a week, 10 hours a day, and we only had a skeleton crew. But that was the first challenge that we had, and that was very difficult. Fortunately, as you know, a lot of people adopted pets, and at the end, business really grew a little bit because of it. But when it started, we did not know that. Number two is we import from China, and after COVID, when that was finally over, the container prices, if you remember that, went through the roof.
Right.
So we pay $4,000. Remember, we're importing dog toys. They're not expensive.
Right.
Maybe we pay $1.50 for a product. And a $4,000 container went to $20,000. So we're paying 5 times the amount to bring the product in. And then that became very difficult. And then the last, which is
Tariffs.
prevalent, is tariffs, of course, and duty. And at one point, we went to 145% for a month last March, exactly a year ago. And that meant for every dollar that we paid for it, we paid $2.45 for the product. But what all that does is it makes it uncompetitive, because you don't know how to compete with other people. So you're put into a position beyond your control that is with an unfair competition.
So what happens to you when all of a sudden everything that you expected in the industry just turns around? How do you survive, A, as a company, and then B, as a leader of the company?
Well, I learned this as a lesson because I made a mistake. You have to make mistakes to grow.
Of course.
I just forged ahead, because my answer is, yes, the profitability is going to go down, but if we stay strong and steady to our customers, we're strong and steady to our customers, and we keep the flow of product going, and we're shipping on schedule, there's a good chance our competitors are not. And I would rather be that person, so when I come out on the other end, I'm going to maintain and retain the business that I have. Because a vendor that dries up a retailer and doesn't support them during hard times may not get the business when times are not hard.
In a position as a leader of a company, what do you feel is the most important ingredient to be a strong leader, to be a director, so that the people in your company feel valued, respected?
Always, you have to stay humble. Always. Don't get too high on the highs, and don't get too low on the lows, because it's a little bit, as you get older, I call it sandpapered. Like I used to get very emotional. If something was great, we'd jump up and down, and then of course something wasn't great, we would get a little bit depressed. And I think you have to stay consistent. you have to have good people. You know that. Everyone says it. You really, really have to have the right people. Treat them like family, and listen to everything that they have to say.
What defines a good person to you? When you're trying to hire someone, you have 10 people that apply for the same position. What to you is the thing that's going to sell you on that 10th person?
Well, I did learn something. The better they interview, usually the worse they are as employees.
Oh, yeah? That's fascinating.
I'm exaggerating.
I didn't learn that on a podcast. The better the interview, the better they are.
No, but now
You're doing great.
If someone is like really dull, they're probably a great employee. And if someone is full of personality, they're probably
full of themselves.
Yes, exactly. I'm exaggerating, but I look for humility. But I think the answer is, I'm not. Our industry is not so sophisticated. We're not financial. We're not. We're not Wall Street.
Right.
So we really look for people that are moldable. Someone that is going to mold with the company, grow with the company, and understand our business and fit in culturally with who we are. I think that really smart people are moldable and are able to adapt to change, and I think that some are. Not everyone we hire can fit in, and it happens in every company. But the ones that do can really thrive and grow.
Do you see yourself retiring at some point and just letting your kids take the company over?
I want to work till I'm 75.
Okay.
That would be my goal. I have a personality such that I have to wake up in the morning and have somewhere to go.
Of course.
I don't have to work all day, but I need to get out of bed, dressed, and somewhere. So I would say that I need to slow it down. And I also, as I get older, by 10:30 I'm worn out. I used to make it till midnight.
You start your life off, you get married, hopefully, you establish a family, you get a job, and you're kind of finding your footing. And then more or less you're focused on yourself. That's what you're really focused on. And you do. You need a strong foundation. But at some point, if you're blessed with success and a little bit of wiggle room, all of a sudden the world around you becomes more important, and you have the opportunity to give. You, your wife, your company, do you have like a philanthropy foundation? And if you do, how do you decide how to give, where to give, when to give?
Okay, I can answer the question two ways. We give personally.
Okay.
I would say a lot to our federation, our synagogue, which we're very active in. We have a very, very big JCC,
right.
That thriving. So I would say we give to that, and a lot of Israeli causes that we like to support. Corporate-wise, we try to stick within our industry. We do a lot with shelters, with adoption agencies. We're very strong. Next week is our largest trade show of the year. We call it internally our Super Bowl, and we do a pet adoption in our booth.
Nice.
It's really nice. It's actually very special, and we probably get about 20 to 25 dogs adopted, in our booth at the show. It's an industry show, so the people who are adopting the dogs are people in the trade people. That's not open to the public, and it's really rewarding to see these people, to take these pets home with them, and.
Are you a pet owner?
I have granddogs right now.
Do you have grandchildren?
I do.
What's better, the granddogs or the grandchildren?
Well, I had the granddogs first. They're all special. How's that?
Beautiful. That's right? A great answer. Very well politically said.
Thank you.
As our viewers and our listeners try to figure out, their lives, and as somebody who, thank God, has had professional success and built a beautiful Jewish family and is part of a community, what would you tell them if you have an opportunity to address them and tell them about something they should be thinking about, some values, some advice? What would you like to tell them? The mic is yours.
You have to learn your industry, and I think it takes 10 years to learn an industry. You're a rabbi, I'm sure.
I'm still learning.
Yeah, but once you're ordained, I'm sure it took you 10 years to perfect.
For sure.
And I think that had I started this when I was 25, it wouldn't have worked. I think that I started when I was 35. It was a big advantage. I think you really, really have to be patient. You have to learn the products, learn the players, and it's not just my industry. I think it's every industry. And I think a lot of people start too young and want to conquer the world. Some do, and some are great at it. But I think you really, really have to really study your industry, know your industry before you take the bat out and you want to hit the ball on your own. You need patience and financing sometimes.
That's
right.
True.
And part two of it is, I'm on the other end of it now. I have a lot of friends. Not everyone is successful professionally and personally. Now, I'm not talking about money, and I'm not talking about family and kids, because you can be single and be very happy. And
Sure.
But I find that in many cases, if they're very successful professionally, they've lost out on something personally, and if have a great personal situation, they sometimes don't have it professionally. And I think you have to really walk that fine line to get that balance, to thrive in both areas of your life.
Do you feel that, building your company impeded your family life, the quality of time, or were you able to balance that successfully?
No, I think when I think, our industry was much small. Our industry was much smaller than it is today. And God, I lived on airplanes. I worked every what we say trade show or distributor show that was there. I made every sale myself. I went to Asia. I did all the purchasing. We were really small. No, it absolutely impeded on my kids. I did.
But they turned out okay.
I think they did, but other people may not. Listen, they had a great childhood, and everyone wants to give their kids the childhood they wish they had.
Okay.
So.
And now you're the grandfather that can make that happen.
Yes,
in a real way.
Yes, it's true. We all went skiing last week.
Beautiful.
So it was nice.
Mark, this has been a real pleasure. I learned a lot of things, and I appreciate you sharing. And I want to wish you lots of success personally and professionally.
Thank you, and I look forward to talking to you again.
God will. Thank you for listening to Jewish Grit, an Olami Mentorship podcast. At Olami Mentorship, we believe that everyone needs a mentor. What better way is there to tap into your personal and professional potential than with a Jewish mentor at your side? Learn more at olami.org/mentorship. Don't forget to keep listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.